Greetings and welcome to Hexed Countered. I'm Joe. In this video, we're going to be continuing our campaign, actually really getting it started with Session 1. This is in Twilight 2000, of course. It is the last orders, and we're going to pick it up right where we left off at the end of Session 0, just outside Kristinehamn in Sweden, with Sergeant Bill Duke and his group who are about ready to head off on their own to get to Poland.
Let's saddle up. The last word had barely left Duke's mouth when Captain Marcus Holt appeared at his elbow. Not a request, not quite an order, just a hand on the sleeve and a quiet, "Sergeant, a word." They stepped away from the group, far enough for privacy, close enough that Duke could still see Astrid watching them from beside the Volvo with those careful, measuring eyes of hers. Holt spoke low and direct, the way he did everything. "I'm not going to pretend we agree, Duke, but until our roads diverge, we're stronger together, and I've been looking at the map." He laid it out cleanly. Head west out of Kristinehamn, follow the northern shore of the lake, then south along the western side. Roads the whole way. He kept them clear of the Soviet formations sitting east and southeast, the 76th Guards near Karlskoga, the 1st Guards pushing towards Mariestadt. Main force formations, even gutted as they were, weren't something a 300-man column wanted to bump into on a narrow Swedish road. "West is unknown," Holt admitted. "Comms are down. We don't know what's out there. Could be nothing. Could be irregular forces. Could be something coming in across the Norwegian border. But it won't be T-80s. That's worth something." He paused, looked at the map one more time. "Safer for all involved." Duke looked at the route, looked at the map, looked at the column of exhausted Marines behind Holt who were all pretending not to watch the two of them. "Agreed," he said. Holt nodded, no handshake, no sentiment, just two professionals who understood each other well enough. Duke walked back to his people. He kept it short. They were going west with the column, around the lake. South from there, Holt's people would peel off for Lingsos when the time came. Duke's group would continue east towards Karlsborg. Karlsborg, he said, not Poland, not yet. Shavers raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Grabowski was already checking something under the Volvo's hood with the expression of a man who'd seen too many civilian vehicles die on military roads. Grissom, or Pop, just nodded, watching Duke the way he always watched Duke, like he was waiting for the next thing to believe in. Astrid said nothing at all. She already knew where they were going. She'd known since the hospital had fallen on her. "Grabowski," Duke said. "Get out from under there. It'll hold." "With respect, Sergeant," Grabowski said, not emerging, "you don't know that." Duke almost smiled. Almost. "Saddle up." The honest truth about the next 2 days is that not much happened worth showing you in detail. 300 plus Marines and 30 vehicles moving in convoy is not a target most rational actors chose to engage. Any scavenger band or paramilitary outfit that spotted them from the tree line did the math quickly and found somewhere else to be. The column moved, the roads held, the weather was cold and gray as spring tried to claw its way out of winter's icy grip. The convoy's most valuable asset, arguably, wasn't any of the LAV 25s. It was a truck near the middle of the column carrying an alcohol still. Built, the story went, by a lance corporal from Kentucky whose name nobody could quite remember, but whose contribution to the war effort was universally acknowledged. The still ran on whatever organic material was available. The vehicles ran on the still. It was not an elegant solution. It worked anyway. Most things in Sweden in the year 2000 worked that way. Duke rode in the Volvo with Astrid, his choice. The LAV had Shavers, Grabowski, and Pup, along with several other Marines who'd attached themselves to Duke's group with the vague and very human hope that Poland couldn't possibly be as bad as this. The entire NATO force in Poland, one of them had said at the start, with the conviction of a man who needs to believe in something, can't be in as bad a shape as we are. Nobody had argued with him. Hope is a logistical asset. You don't waste it. Duke and Astrid didn't talk much. When they did, it was practical. Road conditions, fuel, the column's pace. Whatever the colonel had whispered to her in that hospital room in Christineham, she kept it behind those careful eyes of hers, and Duke didn't push. Not yet. Vänersborg announced itself before they saw it. The smell came first. That particular combination of char and wet concrete and something else underneath it that nobody with any sense tried to identify. Then the skyline, or what was left of one, broken teeth of buildings against the gray sky. The column slowed without anyone giving the order to slow. Some things just don't require orders. They picked their way through in silence, 30 vehicles threading through rubble-strewn streets, past facades with their insides blown out, past cars fused to the road by heat, past everything that had been ordinary once and wasn't anymore. Nobody spoke on the radio. Nobody spoke in the Volvo. Astrid looked straight ahead. Her hands were in her lap and very still. They came out the other side, and the column picked up speed again, and still nobody spoke for a long time after that. Trollhättan was worse. Vänersborg you could pass through quickly if you kept moving and didn't look too hard. Trollhättan had been larger. More of it had survived the initial blast only to burn afterward, which meant the ruins were more varied, more specific, more personal somehow. A shoe in the middle of the road. A child's bicycle against what had been a shop front. The column slowed again. And then Grabowski's voice came over the radio, quiet and careful. "Sergeant, you're going to want to see this." They'd set up in what had been a hardware store. The roof on the east side had partially held, which made it the most valuable piece of real estate for several blocks in any direction. A dozen people, maybe 15, mostly older, a few children. Someone had rigged a stovepipe through a gap in the wall, and smoke was coming out of it in a thin, determined thread. The column stopped. An older man emerged from the hardware store entrance, deliberately, carefully, with his hands visible in the way that people learn to move around armed soldiers. He wore a coat that had been good once. He had the face of someone who had stopped being surprised by bad things and was now simply managing them one day at a time. He spoke in Swedish. Astrid was out of the Volvo before Duke had finished processing that she'd even moved. Astrid moves to the man. They speak. Duke watches from beside the Volvo, unreadable. Holt has pulled up nearby and is watching too. The conversation went on for perhaps 2 minutes. The old man gestured several times, east, then south, then east again. Astrid nodded. Her voice stayed level and professional, and Duke couldn't tell what it was underneath it. When she came back, she translated the part she chose to translate. "He says there were soldiers through here 10 days ago. Not Soviet. He wasn't sure what they were. Moving north. They took what food there was and left." She paused. "He wants to know which way is safe to travel." Duke looked at the rubble around them, at the thin thread of smoke from the stovepipe, at the faces watching from the darkness of the hardware store entrance. He didn't have a good answer. He looked at Holt. Holt looked back at him with an expression that said he didn't have one either. It was Pup who moved first. Nobody ordered him to. He simply climbed out of the LAV, walked to the back, and came back with 2 ration packs, walked over to the old man and held them out. The old man looked at them, looked at Pup, took them with both hands and said something in Swedish. Pup nodded like he'd understood. He hadn't, but some things don't require translation either. Duke watched this, said nothing, turned back to the map spread across the Volvo's hood. Holt walks over, stands beside Duke. Both men looking at the map, not at each other. "You still think there's something worth crossing the Baltic for?" Duke didn't answer immediately. He looked at the hardware store, at the smoke coming from the stovepipe, at Pop walking back to the LAV. Colonel thought so. Holt was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost the command edge. Just a man talking. "Take care of them, Sergeant. All of them." He looked at Astrid briefly, then back at Duke. "Her too." He didn't wait for a response. walked back to his vehicle. The command element of the column began sorting itself. Holt's group continuing south towards Alingsos, Duke's group preparing to break east. The few Marines who'd attached themselves to Duke's group were already moving their gear. The one who'd said the thing about Poland was checking his rifle with the focused attention of a man who'd committed to something and wasn't going to look back. Duke looked at his people, small, outnumbered by the rubble around them, moving anyway. Mount up, he said. We're on our own from here. Holt's column moved south. Duke's group moved east. In the hardware store, the old man watched them go. The thin thread of smoke kept rising from the stovepipe. In the Volvo, Astrid looked straight ahead. Her hands were in her lap, very still. Duke drove. All right, that's going to do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, this one didn't have a ton of role-playing in it, largely because I still needed to finish the setup, basically. And I know I haven't even shown their character sheets yet. And I plan to do that as part of the next session, along with talking about radiation. They drove through 2 cities that have been struck by nuclear weapons, and obviously there would be residual radiation around. And the game does allow you to track that, and we should track that because it does affect their health. So that would be something that will have to be handled at the start of the next session. This one I kind of handled almost as a 0.5 session as opposed to a session 1, largely because I wanted to, as I said, flesh out the story. And I really envisioned them, their story not really beginning until they split with the main 6th Marines Force under Captain Holt, which obviously took place during this session. And it made sense to have them go west and then south around the lake in order to avoid Soviet forces coming right out of Operation Reset. They were in bad shape, low supply, low ammo, all that good stuff. It also allowed me to kind of show Astrid and her concern for her fellow Swedes and her fellow people with the old man. And similarly with Pup, who remains an idealist, and he's called Pup, although his name is Bobby Lee Grissom. The other Marines refer to him as Pup, which is a name that Bill Duke gave him because he tends to follow Duke around like a puppy. And Duke finds it amusing, but he also has a soft spot for him and wants to keep him safe. And you'll see that actually on the character sheets when I show them, probably at the beginning of next session. Do a little bit of exposition of some of the more role-playing gamey type parts that we haven't really talked about yet. This has been mostly narration from essentially like a referee point of view. And ideally, we will get into the more role-playing aspects of it, particularly when we run into a combat situation or we're doing things like foraging or trying to create fuel, all of the survival type stuff that's a big part of this game. We haven't really talked about that yet because I figured if they were traveling with the rest of the 6th Marines, they would have some supplies and fuel enough to get their LAV-25 and Astrid's Volvo 240 down, to where the split was going to happen before they start heading east again towards the Soviets to get to Karlsborg, which you will also learn why they're going there first instead of directly heading south to get to the coast. There is a reason for that. It's a story-based reason. I have not yet revealed what that reason is, but you will find out soon enough. There is a larger kind of story going on behind the scenes here as to why all this is happening, and I will reveal that over time. But for now, we are done. Quick shout out to my channel members. I appreciate you guys taking the opportunity to support the channel. I really do appreciate it. For everybody else, if you have any questions or comments, you know what to do. Put them in the comment section. Please consider liking, sharing, hyping, perhaps even subscribing if you're not already a subscriber. I do enjoy that. Enjoy having new subscribers. It's a boost for me, so to speak. That's probably not the best way to put it, but obviously I like to see my channel grow. It's something that I invest a decent amount of effort into doing it. So yeah, I'd like to see it continue to grow. But even if you don't do any of that stuff, I hope you enjoyed this video and will return to see something else down the road. Perhaps more Twilight 2000, perhaps something else. My primary content is, of course, war games. But as you can see, I've branched out into role-playing games. I also do some sports stuff. So if any of that is within your interest range, feel free to drop by whenever and check it out. But we are done here for now. So until the next time, I am Joe. This is the Hexed Countered channel. And as always, happy gaming.